Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of our podcast, Speaking with Purpose. Today, we dive into a very intriguing and timely question: why is success so often linked to money? It's a question many of us have asked ourselves. In today's society, it's common to hear that success means owning a big house, driving a luxury car, or having a bank account full of money. But is that really the true meaning of success? In this episode, we'll explore diverse perspectives, analyze data, share personal experiences, and challenge common assumptions. I'm joined by my esteemed colleagues, Miguel, Carlos, Juan Jose, and Alejandro. Miguel and Carlos will guide us through scientific studies and relevant data. Juan Jose and Alejandro will engage in a dynamic discussion based on their personal viewpoints. And finally, Miguel and Carlos will offer a reflective conclusion to wrap up the episode. So, without further ado, let's set the context. Miguel, could you help us understand what success looks like today?
Thank you, Gabriel. Thank you, Gabriel. Success is a deeply subjective concept. For some, it means achieving personal goals, fulfilling responsibilities, or simply having stability. However, a large portion of the population associates success with material possessions or financial wealth, like luxury, abundance, and economic status. This association, this association has deep cultural and social roots. For decades, the narrative has been reinforced. If you don't have money, you have failed. If you do, you have made it. But that's misleading. There are people who seem to have it all and yet live with anxiety, emptiness, or isolation. One of the most relevant studies on this topic is the Harvard study of adult development, which followed 724 individuals over more than 80 years. Its key finding is revealing. Strong, meaningful relationships, no money, are the greatest predictor of long-term happiness and well-being.
Thank you, Miguel. To complement that insight, I want to introduce some psychological and sociological frameworks that help explain this phenomenon. Let's start with Maslow hierarchy of needs. This psychological model suggests that once basic needs like food, safety, and shelter are met, which often require money, we seek higher needs like belonging, esteem, and self actualization. The problem is that our society often gets stuck at the security level, which is heavily tied to economic stability. It's also important to understand that in capitalist systems, money becomes a stand in for human value. The assumption is the more you earn, the more you worth. But that's a flawed equation. Money doesn't measure empathy, wisdom, or someone's ability to create community. There's also a concept from behavioral economics called the hedonic treadmill. As income increase, so do expectations. That means you never really feel like you have enough. You're always chasing the next thing, and that creates constant dissatisfaction.
I'd also like to highlight the role of education and media in shaping this narrative. From a young age, we are taught to admire wealthy and famous people, not necessarily for their character or contributions, but for what they own, movies, TV, and even children's stories, reinforce the idea that success must be visible, measurable, and showy. This creates a kind of a collective obsession with external symbols of success, often at the expense of our inner values.
And building on what Miguel said, we can ignore the impact of economic inequality. When the gap between the rich and poor grows, money stops being just a goal. It becomes a symbol of survival and dignity. This increases the pressure to reach a certain financial standard, and those who don't often feel invisible or like failures. But let's be clear, human dignity should never depend on income.
Thanks for that thorough analysis, Miguel and Carlos. It's fascinating and troubling how deeply embedded these beliefs are. Now, let's open up the discussion. Why do we continue to associate success with money?
That connection has historical and cultural roots. Since the rise of industrial society, success began to be measured in terms of production, efficiency, and accumulation. The image of the successful man was the businessman, the banker, the one who claimed the corporate ladder. In many cultures, especially in Latin America, money is seen not just as wealth, but as social status, as a sign that you made it despite adversity. This ties into family values, the desire to provide a better life for your children, and public recognition. But we must be careful. When money becomes the only measure of success, we stop valuing integrity, creativity, or vocation, and that weakens society, even if it looks like it's thriving.
I completely agree with Juan Jose. I'd add that we live in an economic system that rewards competition over collaboration. Modern capitalism has turned modern capitalism has turned money into more than a tool. It's like a scoreboard in a game where everyone wants to win. Of course, money solves real needs, housing, healthcare, education, but once survival is covered, chasing money as the only goal disconnected us from what truly matters. That said, I think we're in an interesting moment. Many people, especially younger generation, are beginning to question this paradigm. They are seeking balance, purpose, experiences. Ahí es la isla porque lo parara, imbécil. They are seeking balance, purpose, experience, not just high salaries, and that give me hope.
Thanks, Juan Jose and Alejandro. Now let me ask you, if money were no longer the main measure of success, what other indicators should society use?
Isaac's success should be measured by emotional well being, inner peace, healthy relationships, and a sense of purpose. Someone who lives in harmony with themselves and their community is, in my opinion, more successful than someone with millions but who is stressed and disconnect. We should also consider the impact we have on others. Did you make someone's life better? Were you genius with your time, your wisdom, your presence? That's also success, even if it doesn't show up in a bank account.
I completely agree. I'd add the importance of mental health, work life balance, and authenticity. Too often, we become what the market wants us to be, not who we truly are. If we start building internal alignment, connection, and pos- and positive impact, we could if we start building internal alignment, connection, and positive impact, we could refine success in a much more human and sustainable way.
One last question before we wrap this up. Has social media been intensified the connection between success and money, or can it help redefine it?
Social media is a double edged sword. On one hand, it intensifies superficiality, showing only the pretty parts of life luxury, beauty, success. That creates pressure and false perception of what it means to succeed. But I also believe there's transformational potential. Some creators share vulnerability, personal growth, educational, and meaningful content. It depends on who we choose to follow and what stories we choose to feed.
Exactly. Social media has a life the link between money and success, but it can also change it. We're seeing more and more profiles that highlight mental health, simple living, purpose-driven work, and sustainability. The key is to reprogram our mental algorithm to consume content that inspires us to be, not just to have.
Thank you all for such a rich and thoughtful discussion. To wrap it up, I'd like to hand it over to Miguel and Carlos for some final reflections.
Thanks, Gabriel. I think this episode invites us to rethink the true meaning of success. Chasing money is valid to cover needs, to gain stability, But when it becomes the final goal, it often pulls us away from what we really want: connection, purpose, and peace. I leave our listeners with this question: are you chasing the success defined or the one you were taught to want?
To complement that, I'd like to leave you with a few key ideas. 1. Success is not universal, it's personal. It's personal. 2. Wealth without mental health, meaningful relationships, or purpose is incomplete. 3. Our value as beings should never be measured in numbers, but in impact, integrity, and authenticity. Imagine a society where we ask less what do you do or how much do you make and more what drives you or how are you really doing. That change start with us.
Beautiful reflections, Carlos and Miguel. And that brings us to the end of this episode of Speaking with Purpose. We hope it made you reflect and perhaps even reconsider what success means to you. Until next time, and stay thoughtful and keep speaking with purpose. Today, we dive into a very intriguing and timely question. Why is success so often linked? ¿Quién se está riendo?
No, bro, es que yo veo a Carlito mirándome.
Bueno, no se rían de lo. Bueno,
Ya, ya, ya.